Hello, my name is Kevin Fleming from Grupo Mariana. I'm the developer of Playa Mariana here in Nicaragua. You're live with me in Challenge Day 2, which is great to see you coming back or watching the replay wherever you are. I was just mentioning that yesterday we were talking about how to apply a filter to the number of countries that you're looking at, because the more countries you look at, the more confusing information can become. And so what we talked about yesterday was, what are those criterias that you apply when looking at different countries, whether it be hemisphere, whether it be region, language, culture, pre-construction, finished product, has concrete roads, dirt roads. There are certain criterias that you need to write down, and those are your absolute must when searching for property. And what that allows you to do is really, really fast eliminate stuff that doesn't work for you. And so you get rid of all that overwhelm. I'm coming to you today live. I changed the scenery. I was upstairs on the balcony yesterday, but I'm in Granada, Nicaragua. For those of you who don't know me, I'll introduce myself again. For the last 20 years, I've been developing real estate in Nicaragua. And quite simply, my story is one of a love story. I simply met a girl in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and I followed her home. I gave up a 13-year corporate career. I was happy. I can't tell you, some people would say, I just hated what I was doing and I needed to get out and there was something else I wanted to do. I loved what I was doing, but I loved this girl more. So I gave it all up, and with no language and no money and no job and no background in real estate, jumped into Nicaragua. I ended up getting married in Nicaragua, having my honeymoon here, and moving there all within an 18-month period dating back to 2003. So today, I come at you with 20 years of experience, having talked to over 1,000 people, presented Nicaragua on 100 different stages around the world, 66 clients underneath our belt with our company who bought properties with our company, well over $10 million of investment, working with 30 global firms, names such as Nicholas Design, Kemper Sports Management, Wyndham Hotel Groups. You might have seen us featured in the New York Times, the LA Times, International Herald Tribune. And so over the last 20 years, we've been around. So today I have nothing to sell you except the idea of having an open mind and looking at things a little bit different. All right. This challenge is something that I've been preparing for a while, not in an organized structure, because it would take close to 3,000 slides to tell you everything. And I'd probably need about 3 months to really have you explain it. So I'm trying to distill 20 years into 5 days. And today you're going to get a very good glimpse of, we're not going to get into the how to buy real estate and exact steps and site visits and how to select a lawyer. That maybe is for day 4 or 5. Yesterday was a very macro look at, when you start to come at looking at information, what do you do? And so today I'm going to make the assumption that the homework that you've done is you now know or have an idea of what 3 countries are of interest to you. So then the next question is, what do you do after that to look at further distilling what those countries can offer you? So today we're gonna basically cover 5 things. All right. We're gonna talk about safety, but not in the terms that you might think in regards to violent crime. We're gonna we're gonna address the elephant in the room, the political nature of buying real estate in these foreign countries and what to watch out for. I'm going to talk about risk and why risk is good. And it's simply, no risk does not exist in any development. And I'm really going to key in on familiarity and how that contrasts against safety, and why the brain moves towards thinking that's a good thing. And lastly, we're going to focus on patterns. And so I wrote down, to give myself some guidance, basically five questions for you to follow along that I'm going to answer. And I'm going to give you some background and some stories of what I went through. And I may relate to Nicaragua and my experience here. And you should not think like I'm trying to pimp you real estate in Nicaragua, because, I'm not, although you can buy some. But the core is, the experiences that I've had are experiences that you can learn and take with you into almost any country. And I say that because the premise of this challenge is how to teach you how to buy international real estate and avoid the common mistakes that people make. Because I've seen a lot of them over the years. And being a real estate developer for the last 20 years, I'm going to tell you what no real estate developer or agent wants you to know. All right. And that could be good or bad. And it may not be because they don't want you to know it either. It could just be because they don't know it themselves to really impart upon you. So I don't know what story is going to come out of me. So be ready, be ready. So there will be a replay to this. So in the case you have to go, that's okay. Don't worry about it. You can always take notes from the replay. But let's get started right away. The first thing I want to talk about is how do you define a safe country? Now, before I get there, can I tell you a story? About 45 minutes ago, I was in my pool and I was swimming and I saw this bee floating in the water. So naturally, I went up to this bee with my with my shoe and I scooped it up and I put it on the patio and I was swimming and I stopped and I was just watching what this bee was doing. And basically it was drowning in the water and maybe I temporarily saved it. So I was curious to see what was going to happen. And so when I flipped it outside the water, obviously it was really wet. It was upside down, it was struggling. And for about literally 3 minutes, I watched it walk like it had a limp. I've never seen that before with a bee before. And then all of a sudden, it took off, okay, and started to fly. But I flew like maybe 5 feet, then right back into the pool. I'm like, oh man, okay, I gotta go save this bee again. So I go back to the pool and I scoop it out and I'm watching it and it's upside down. It looks like it's on its last legs. It's about to die. I flip it over with my shoe. And as soon as I flip it over, it flies away. Like it literally escaped and flied away. And I tell you this story because it was reminding me of this presentation today and individuals who are basically drowning in information of all these countries that you're looking at. And you don't know which way is up or down or where to go. And unless somebody helps you to proverbially get out of the pool and give you a chance to go in the right direction, you have no chance at all. You'll never do anything. So when the bee dropped back into the pool after trying, it reminded me of what we're going to talk about today, that without this guidance today to think of things in a way in which you might not have thought before, you might just swim, you might just fly off right back into the pool. And someone may or may not be there at that time to help you. And the direction you go or the circumstances of your outcome could be very different than that bee that survived and flew away. So I'm here to save you. I'm here to save you. Now, some of you who are listening to this, just before we get started, you might be a seasoned investor and you already have multiple properties underneath your belt. You even have a passport to leave the country. Other people might not even have a passport, have never purchased property before, and maybe hearing this for the first time. So let's all be patient with each other. Again, when you hear something that's really important, I encourage you to write it down or type it into the chat. And at the end of the presentation, I'm going to look at it and I'll try and cover off all those questions because they're all going to be important. Now, normally in these challenges, if you've not been involved with the challenge before, then welcome to the challenge. This is about giving you a little bit of information every single day, and every day builds upon the last. So for those of you who are just joining late, or you just may be watching this for the first time, I was just saying that yesterday was a recap of how to filter countries and apply a criteria. Today, we pressure test that criteria and we get into the macro details of things to look at from a different scale. So today, how do you define a country beyond the headlines? Because the hype of what you see is something that's going to be distracting. For example, I can go back to 2006. I go back that far. And I remember it was October 2006. And I was buying my second piece of property, which was 923 acres and $4 million. And this is June of 2006. And everybody thought I was absolutely nuts because in the country, in Nicaragua, it had been a liberal type government for the last 7 or 8 years since the transition back in the late 90s. And in the polls, Daniel Ortega, a very popular figure back in the day and still to this day, was leading. And so everybody was, wow, what's going to happen? You know, is he going to take this country? Is there going to be confiscations? Is there going to be war again, a revolution? You wouldn't believe the number of things that I heard, but I didn't care because I'd already been in the country for a couple of years. married to a local Nicaraguan, had already invested $1 million, already been around the world. Um, and I knew what the country had to offer. So I knew what was happening behind the scenes, but the headlines were something a whole lot more scarier. That is for sure. Now, what ended up happening was Ortega won in the election, which turned out to be uh, for me, it was the greatest thing that could have happened because one of the stigmas a country might have is all the what if scenario. What if this happens? What if that happens? You know, you could what if yourself to death on what possibly could be rather than just dealing with what you have in the meantime. So in a lot of ways, it cleared out the ghost of what was going to happen because back then, we're going back 20 years now, what transpired after that was completely fine. Nothing happened. In fact, security of the country became stronger. Property rights in the country remained. Safety in the country improved. So nothing bad happened. So when it comes to headlines and fears, what you see is not always what is the reality on the ground. Now, the question is, how do you get that information on the ground? When you come into country, you're going to talk to a lawyer and he'll tell you likely what you want to hear because he's going to want your business. I know I'm going to get crap for that in the comment section, but that's the truth of the matter. Very few will tell you the truth because in depending on what country that you're going into, you may not be giving them any business and quickly moving on. In addition, it's tough to trust real estate agents. Some are good, okay, and some are not so good. And it's really difficult when you're dealing with agents in a foreign country. One, they tend to be not licensed because there's no licensing standards depending upon what country you're in. So anybody could sell real estate. If you have a last name, welcome to the Realtors Club in whatever country you're going into. And likely what's going to happen is, depending upon what office you walk into, they're just going to take you to the closest real estate project that is to their office and or the highest commission project that they're going to get for making a sale and basically helping you along. So you're not going to get the inside scoop on what's happening politically in the country, which I'm going to deal with in a second. But going back to safety, I don't want to discount the importance of safety as it regards to crime or violent crime or petty robbery, because that's important. It's important. But for this presentation for today, I'd rather you think of safety in terms of structure. Okay, meaning nothing goes perfect anywhere in any government, in any system, in any institution. What I look for is how well have these structures been tested? Did they crumble and fall apart? Is there a lasting legacy of experience that people had that could be counted upon moving forward? Will the institution crumble when things get tough? Because every country will take its knocks in the press, will take its knocks in its elections and its transitions. But what structures are in place that stay in place during transitions of government? So, depending upon what country and depending upon how the elections take place, looking at the transition periods in your research of the elections and seeing what changed is really important. Now, I will say one red flag that you should watch out for is stuff that is created in new laws that are retroactive. Okay, those can be a little bit scary depending upon what they are, but that's not usually a very good sign of stability. Now, it doesn't mean that will in itself completely eliminate a country, but they're just things for you to watch out for. All right, and not many people are going to tell you that because not many people even know that. So when you're looking at the countries that you want to get involved in, certainly look at the safety statistics. That's important. But also keep in mind, I'll go back to safety. Safety really depends where. Okay. It's really difficult to paint a country with a wide berth. Like this place is really dangerous because myself, I'm from the lower mainland, Vancouver, British Columbia. And in that particular town where I lived, Hastings Street, East Hastings Street, is like a very dangerous area. It's not a place you'd walk around at night, even during the day sometimes in some areas. Or if you're in Edmonton, Alberta, down Jasper Avenue, or wherever you live, I'm sure that there are places that are safer than others. and certainly different times of the day that you're going to go and not go. And so understanding the regions of a country gets into the safety factor rather than just looking at, oh, this country is dangerous. So even to this day, I wouldn't say Guatemala is dangerous or Honduras is dangerous or El Salvador is dangerous. The press would say that, but I wouldn't come to a complete conclusion until I knew what region I might be interested in and what are the statistics in that area that makes it dangerous or not dangerous. So that's a little bit about safety. I want you to focus on structure of the safety and not so much just the violent crime or petty robbery. You want to really think about how structures in place can not necessarily be problem-free, but how are they responsibly reliable? All right. So that takes care of safety. So when you have any questions in regards to safety, I know it might seem obvious, but safety people usually just think about, am I going to get robbed? What's it like coming into the airport? When I get to the project, how long is the drive? Is there armed bandits on the road? If I see police, can I trust the uniforms that they're wearing to stop if they try and pull me over? Those are real concerns. Those are real concerns, and you definitely want to find out about those. So I'm not here to tell you one specific country is safer than another. It's a factor that you need to look into. And that's important because yesterday we talked about the 4 critical factors that big money players, institutions, family offices, seasoned real estate investors look for. And from my experience around the world, there are 4 things, and safety is like the number 1. Then comes location, then comes tourist attractions, then comes foreign investment. So what I want to talk about now and move on to is, how do you evaluate the political stability without ideology? Now, this one is a hot topic. I'll talk specifically about, should I talk about Nicaragua? I don't know. I think when it comes to political stability, people generally fear what happens when governments change. And the important thing to understand is governments change, administrations change, leaders change, power changes. So to allow yourself to get emotionally connected to the political realities of a country, it's probably not a good idea. Okay. And there's this house that I'm renting or I'm staying at. The owner of the house, he's been in Nicaragua all his life. And I asked him, I said, how do you deal with the political question when your guests come to your hotel that he manages? And he simply says, look, I'm in the tourism business. I'm not in the political business. And I find with my experience, when you're not involved in a political system, then it's not really something you need to pay attention to unless the political system is busy changing laws. That's the most important thing. So when people talk to me like, how do you evaluate the political system? When it comes to foreign ownership, I look, well, has anything changed? Are properties being confiscated? What is going on within the lands that might affect that ownership of properties? Is there anything retroactively being done? Now, I'll use Nicaragua as an example. I get asked a lot about the political situation here. And this challenge is not for my political views, but just for the record, I'm for the government and pro Nicaragua in what it stands for right now. And I say that because I truly believe in the country and the resources that it has and it protecting what it has. Now, some people might say, or you might hear, oh, properties were confiscated. You should not let that bother you because you don't know the circumstances of why. You don't know if there was a bad title, if it was if it was something to do with debts that were owed. Very seldom is it just the government says, hey, I don't like you, so I'm going to take your land. That really doesn't happen. I'm not saying it can't happen, but there's usually no motivation for that to happen. And when you hear of those particular properties being confiscated in any country, it's usually a one-off scenario. It's not like a 923-acre resort that I'm developing. I've spent over $10 million. I have every single permit that can be issued for the development plans that we have. Letters of no objection from the state government, title insurance policies from First American Stewart Title. Project like mine, they don't have problems from the government because we went through all the government departments to get the permits issued. So, but I won't say that I don't know if property is being confiscated, but what matters is why. So if someone said to you, that project is dead, the owner was kicked out of the country, and I might suggest, well, were they doing anything illegal? Were they trying to develop without the permits? Did they have everything in order? What did they do? They must have did something like that happened. So you'll never really know the exact details behind the scenes because in this challenge, as I said yesterday, one of the things that is very important to understand when you're looking to buy real estate overseas that nobody will tell you is there's what's happening, okay, that you see in all the publication and all the marketing, all those pretty renderings, and that stuff looks great. But there's always another world that's happening behind the scenes. Always. The crap that you don't see that could affect you or things that are coming that really can't be disclosed to you yet that might increase the value of the property, but it's a surprise and you benefit from that afterwards. So it goes on both sides. So on one hand, a property might be experiencing title claims, but on the other hand, they might have a letter of intent for a hotel that they're going to announce in 3 or 4 months, and so there's a lot going on. And sometimes it's really difficult to find out all that information. Now, what I will say is this. Generally speaking, once you get further into the evaluation of the country that you want to be in, and you're able to work down what projects you want to invest in, depending upon what region and due diligence, which we'll cover tomorrow, you'll tend to start to get to know the developer of the project. And so today I'm a developer of a project and we have a number of clients, and most clients end up being in these foreign countries. Most clients. Well, yeah, I would say most clients of the developer end up forming a really established good relationship because the developer in the countries, they, for the most part, I would say they all want to perform on what it is that they want to deliver to you. But not everything that happens is within the scope of that developer to make sure that what happens to you is perfect. Now, risk is something that we should address because some countries just might feel more risky emotionally when you should be looking at things from a structurally sound standpoint of view. Now, how do I evaluate risk? There's whoever tells you there's no risk in something, they're simply lying to you. There's risk in everything. Now, as an investor, once you evaluate your country that you want to be in, risk is the really big next thing. Now, over the years, I've just learned to try to find out what are people's level of risk. The mismatch of expectations of problems that you might experience moving into the future in any development is usually going to come down to your tolerance for risk, your expectation for return, and where you fit on that scale. So I'll give you an example. When I started buying real estate in Nicaragua, I bought it from the standpoint of view of here's this lot survey. It has no permits. I still have to check the title. I don't know what the soil studies are going to reveal. No wells have been drilled on site, so I don't know what the pH level is or the salt level or the solubility. The municipalities had not gone into municipalities yet to see if a development permit was even possible. Who knows if there's archaeological findings underneath the ground as you're going to start surveying the property. I mean, those are all real things. But when I found the property that I have right now, understanding the territory of where you're buying land is important. So, for example, in a geography of a country, is it known to have water or no water? In that same geography of the country, is it more mountainous or more flat? In the same geography of the country, what is the soil made of principally? And all those things, too much detail for today, but maybe Thursday when I walk my land with you live on site, I'll explain to you the importance of those elements. But I knew some of those critical factors beforehand. So when I saw this property that I was looking at, I remember saying to my wife, we're going to buy this land. And the land was somewhere close to $4.4 million. And the agent was telling me he just got this land on the market for sale. And he's like, Kevin, if you don't put down a deposit or make an offer, then I'm going to have to list the property. There's a story behind it, why we're looking for land. But I'll fast forward. So I talked to my wife that night and I said, listen, honey, we're going to buy this property. We're going to make an offer for $4 million. I'm going to write a check for $100,000 non-refundable US to have 4 months to do our due diligence. Okay. And she was like, okay. So that's a level of risk that I was willing to take, to spend $100,000 just to lock up a property for 4 months to do the due diligence. Now, it is likely you'll never have to do that. All right. Because that was probably the highest level of risk a person could take on land to purchase. Yeah, I do. There's other stuff too, but it gets interesting. So we ended up buying the property, and it's not to say that we didn't experience difficulties that came later in the development of the lands or the time it takes to get things, but knowing where you come into play with risk is important. So I want to break it down further. So pay attention. In the case you were in my house right now, I would say to you this. I'd say, look, what is your expectation of return? Are you seeking a 25% return with zero level of risk guaranteed in the next 2 years when you buy real estate or you hand over money to me to invest in our project? I would say, no, thank you, because that doesn't exist. And anyone who would tell you that is loco. All right. What's important is coming up with a realistic assessment of what risk you're willing to take. Now, my general advice to people when buying real estate overseas is this: however long you think it's going to take longer. I'm sure you've heard that before. And whatever you think is not going to go wrong, something else will go wrong, because something always does. But that goes back to the safety. Not only are government systems stress tested, but developments are stress tested as well, because all sorts of things are going to happen in a development during the permitting process. And how well that project that you're looking at handles those situations will reveal into the future how in which that developer is likely to handle problems that arise, because problems always arise. So for example, we've been in a development stage for 20 years on and off, through financial crashes, through pandemics, through smear campaigns, through having to shelf $2 million worth of plans and starting over, all kinds of stuff. But we just keep going, all right? Nothing will stop us. And when you look at projects that are already built, you'll have other problems, like perhaps the construction quality was not great, or a roof needs to be assessed. Or I'll give you an example of stuff that can happen. I remember my first project, I was really excited. We were going to build our first villa, or sample villa. And so we hired a contractor, gave him $25,000 on this $150,000, $200,000 project. And he was to build this villa. And everything looked great in the first month as the foundations are going through, until I got these pictures from somebody, I won't say who, and he was telling me that the contractor was using water from the ocean to mix the concrete to pour the foundations. Yeah, that happens. He was supposed to truck in the water, but I guess they ran out. And so the great response of the workers was to go get the water from the ocean. So long story short, we had to scrap all of that construction, tear everything down, remove all the foundations, and start over. So those things happen. So when you're looking at risk in the development, knowing what can happen is almost impossible to know everything. But knowing what has happened in the past and how things were dealt with, I encourage you not to look on that negatively. Look upon that as how things might be in the future when problems arise. And it's really important, because when things go wrong, it can be very emotional. And I find when you come into these foreign countries and you invest in real estate, what generally happens is this. One, everybody invests more than they can afford to lose. Okay. It just happens. I can't tell you, well, I know why, but it's because, one, you see opportunity, you see the chance for return depending upon which country you're in. You start with one project, you buy property in another project, or you might buy multiple properties in the same project, and it gets exciting. It really does get exciting. Something comes over you. And when you first invested in the country, you might have been, I'm going to be cautious, I'm going to be careful, I'm going to dip my toe in the water. But what happens is you get consumed with the emotion of progress, the emotion of taking possession of your property, the emotion of using it, and then you start to want more, which is not a bad thing, providing that you can afford to do so and not get emotionally attached to the property if things go wrong or take longer to develop. So here's a prime example. I'll use myself because, I'm going to tell you what nobody will tell you. When we purchased our property, we did so with a number of investors. I just didn't pull $4 million out of the bank and spend the money. We raised capital from a number of investors and we pulled that money together to buy our lands. And part of the process of buying the land was a number of investors were going to get a number of lots for a certain price, basically cost, and they would get to pick their lots on a first come, first served basis. Great, no problem. That all worked out great. And we raised all the money we needed in 4 months and bought our land. But it was years later that even people that took possession of their properties and got titles, and some who didn't close for whatever reason, they started to shift in their mindset from the investor that they were getting involved, one might say, at a land banking opportunity where you're literally buying property into a development that proposes a golf course and at least 4 or 5 kilometers of infrastructure along with the rest of the amenities that comes in resort. Right away, that's $10 million. So there's no way that you could be thinking you're going to spend $250,000, $300,000 taking part in the original purchase of land, that there's $10 million just right there. $10 million still needs to be raised. But somewhere along the lines, people lose track of that idea. And they think that because the development timeline might be longer or whatever factors took place in the middle, now the expectation is, why isn't it there? Right. And they lose track of, why they invested in the first place and the risks that are involved. So that leads me to back into the risk situation. When you get involved, know what risk level and your tolerance is. What is the amount of money that if you were to invest, if you didn't see it for 5 or 10 years, it's not going to change your life. All right. You shouldn't be overextending yourself on the hopes and the promises and the dreams and renderings and what could be, but know what you're purchasing into, whether it's pre-construction and or a finished product. Both have their advantages. Now, when it's pre-construction, you're most certainly going to get a better deal, and there is a higher upside for you, but that higher upside comes with higher risk. And it's something you need to understand when looking at any project anywhere in the world. And when you're buying something completed, then you should already know that the value in what you're purchasing is already left. It's already high. You're essentially buying the leftovers, or you may even be buying the resales of other people's properties, and they're the ones that benefit from the increase in the valuation of the property. I hope you guys got that. So that's a little bit on risk. I can go a lot on risk and details, but the important thing is not so much be cautious who you give your money to. There's things that you need to know and a due diligence checklist, and we'll go through that tomorrow and the next day. But just don't overextend yourself so you don't become emotionally attached to your property, and it's going to affect your quality of life. And that goes to why you're purchasing and for the right reasons. Okay. So I want to move on. So for those of you, that was a long explanation of risk, but type into the chat if you understand that. That sounds, you understand what I said, how that can work for you. It might seem obvious, but you would be surprised that having made 66 individual sales, the likelihood is about 75% of those people are overextended. 20% probably shouldn't have purchased in the first place. And 5% are really the ones who are truly qualified, accredited, and made the purchase. And they're my favorite clients because they're the ones who can weather the storms of what comes in good times and bad. So I'll leave it there and I'll let you guys use your imagination of where that goes from there. So let's move on. So the next question I wanted to address was, why do people confuse familiarity with safety? Okay, so this one is good. Generally, the biggest fear that people have is usually of the unknown. And I'm sure you've heard of that, the unknown and failure, right? How to avoid the fear of the unknown and failure. And whether that's what people are going to think of what you do, or how you did it, or you tried something that no one else is trying. But there's something about familiarity that's comfortable. And when you have that feeling of comfortableness, you tend to feel safe. But it's an illusion when it comes to buying real estate international. All right. Comfort, okay, is not safety. And it's really something important you need to understand. And familiarity is a trap that you don't want to fall into, because what happens is you'll have a buddy who says, I just bought a property in Costa Rica, or I just bought a property in Nicaragua. And he'll describe this wonderful lifestyle and this amazing experience that he had. And naturally, you start to like that. And you're like, I want that too. And you might go along with what that particular individual purchased, and you find the same development and you buy the same property. But at the end, the truth of the matter was, it's not the best fit for you. And the real truth of the matter is, you likely didn't know what was the best fit with you, the fit for you to begin with. So it's really easy to fall into the trap of familiarity with somebody telling you how great this was without first assessing your own situation. What is your risk level? What cultural aspect do you want to get involved in? How long do you want to fly to get into a country? How many times are you possibly going to go to the country? What is the cost of airline? What is the development timeline of the project? If it's built already, or is there more stuff to be built? Are you buying for investment to get in early, or is it for personal use? All those components are criteria elements that nobody has. So what happens is you hear someone else do it, then you think like, hey, that's great, I want in too. And it just might not be the best fit for you. And then problems arise because that there's the mismatch that starts to take place. And so what you want to see and be careful with is the predictabilities that you might think are there are really vulnerabilities of what you're exposing yourself to. And I'd say routine of what you do every single day is something that is going to be important to you, because how you expect to act on the property, or what you want to do, or the amenities you want to enjoy, this is going to be a critical nature of what it is and how you choose a property. Now, it's hard to overcome that because buying property is very emotional. And I'll give you an example. One of the most dangerous traps of buying land in any foreign country are these tours. Okay, now this is not going to help me because I have a tour coming up in March and we're selling real estate in February, but it's needed because you go on a site inspection tour. But let me prepare you for this. What happens on these tours is you'll come into country, and first of all, you're immersed in a new culture. And you're likely going to love it because you already had an inclination of that's what you wanted to experience. And so your mind is open to suggestion right off the bat. Now, depending upon what projects you go to, I'm not saying everyone has hardcore tactics that they're going to try and sell you, like the bad reputation or the good reputation of timeshare sales or private residence clubs or equity ownership opportunities. They all have their pros and their cons, but you will find your mind entering into another level completely in a foreign country with a foreign language, with new people, in a group situation that you're out of control. All right. You become, I don't want to say a victim to the circumstance of the culture or the flavor or the salty, warm weather, because that's all good. But certainly your senses are not as sharp as they would be when you're back at home looking on your computer, assessing logically what it is you want to do. But nobody buys property logically. If they did, they'd all buy from me because logically, you want to buy it from a project where the title is secure and there's title insurance in place and the permits are ready. There's an opportunity to get in early, and there's not going to be too many objections in trying to develop a property. That's logic. Emotion is you're like, wow, look at the ocean. It's such a great color today. Emotion is, oh, this is one of my new favorite beers. Emotion is, past the suntan lotion, or you're on the quads, or you're taking a helicopter ride, or you're on a horse. These events, they're great because they allow you to experience all of this in a short period of time. but you should have some logic behind you before you come into the country, not just show up unprepared. Because when you show up unprepared, you're more likely to make a more foolish decision because quite simply your emotions will take over. There's there's a story called The Elephant and the Rider. Maybe some of you have heard this, maybe not, but I'll tell it you anyway. So it goes like this. When it comes to emotions and logic, think of think of logic as you yourself sitting on top of an elephant. Okay. You might have seen I may be profiling the thing a little bit, but maybe when you see like riders on elephants, I think like you see that mostly in India. That's just my experience. Okay. And think of emotions like the elephant. Okay. So you have emotions and you have logic. And this is you. And how things function in your emotion and logic is, like I said, you are the rider, you're the logic, okay? But the elephant is the emotion. Now, in most times, whenever you see the rider on top of an elephant, wherever you might have seen it, everything looks pretty calm, doesn't it? It looks like the rider is actually controlling the elephant and somewhat steering the elephant where it wants to go. What you never see is the elephant out of control and the rider just hanging on for dear life, right? Or being thrown off the elephant. You never see that. But in a group situation, okay, the groups are like the elephant, okay? And you, the rider within the group, okay, that's the logic, right? You have no control because the elephant is out of control. And that's what happens in these group environments on these tours. And they're a lot of fun. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I encourage you to come down. I just, bring your logic with you, but don't let emotion overcome you that's my advice to you. And even advice when you would come down for one of our events, okay? When you come to the property and you start to see the ocean view and you start walking 20 kilometers of beachfront and you go in the water and you go for a swim and it's like 80 degrees and it's 30 degrees Celsius outside and the sun is shining and you can't see a cloud anywhere and you see construction on site, like that's really powerful. I mean, I get excited just saying it, but that's really powerful and you want to be a part of that. But, but, but I encourage you before you just jump into things, like just make sure that whatever you're looking at fits your criteria, okay, of what's really important to you and what's your level of risk. Notwithstanding that, like jump right in because buying experience overseas is going to be one of the most satisfying things you're going to do. But the flip side of that also is it could be one of the biggest mistakes you make in your life, okay, when you can't afford to lose the money that you invest. Now, yeah, I want to qualify that a little bit. When I when I started with real estate back in the day, and this is true for most developments. In fact, I want to get I'm kind of excited, but I want to get serious for a second. All right. So can I get serious with you for a second? When you're seeking to buy property overseas, one of the most important things and questions you can ask, a question that I've sold 66 properties over $10 million. Nobody has even asked me this question. And this is just one of many that are important. But for this particular purpose, and we're talking about risk, and that's the flavor of today, what's really important for you to understand is where's the money coming from to build everything is being proposed to you, because I can tell you it's not cheap. All right. So part of you understanding where the money comes from, one, is the questions that you should be asking are things like, do you own the property outright or do you owe money on the land? Is there a mortgage? Not to say one is better than the other. Well, probably owning the property outright is better. But if there's a mortgage on the property, all right, you want to know about that. Okay. Second would be, let's say there's $3 million or $5 million or $8 million golf course that's going to be built. Where's the money coming from? Is it going to be a bank loan or is it going to be private equity? Or are you trying to raise capital through sales to use the money to put in for infrastructure? And again, a common practice, not one is better than the other. They all have their pros and cons. Now, in my experience that I can relate to you, in the case you take anything from this presentation today, remember this. All of these developments All of them. They all are dependent upon sales to survive. That may be sales in the form of real estate, or it may be sales in the form of driving demand to hotel rooms to generate revenue for the operations of the entity for you to enjoy. Once money dries up, doesn't matter where you are, the project is going to stop. Now, here are some things to factor and consider. When a project stops or is delayed or is stalled, or a situation like a 2008 financial crash happens, really the only project that's going to survive is the one that has the least amount of debt. And that is the one that owns the property outright and there's no mortgage, or there's no bank financing, or there's no line of credit where money is owed, because that's generally where the problems start to rise in these developments, because when the money dries up, the payments can't be made. So properties that are under construction or about to start, it's important you just understand where's the money coming from. Now, I might be getting ahead of myself right here, but I'm going to give you something that I'm absolutely positive you don't know. And that is this. One, you probably have never asked the question, where's the money coming from? But when you understand that you need sales to drive a project forward, and or even those sales to generate revenue to get the money to pay back the loan, okay? One of the most important things you want to know is, what's the plan for sales in this development, all right? In the case that there's no plan, or a developer can't show you his plan, or might not want to show you his plan, that should send signals to you that when your investment is reliant upon the project continuing, depending upon the stage in which you're purchasing, a plan for sales is one of the most important things you want to see. It is as important as title insurance, as water on your property, as having all the permits to be able to construct, the location. All that is important, but a plan, the marketing plan, having that in place and what you're going to do is really, really important. Okay. And not many people look or ask to see that. Why? Probably because they don't have it, or developers might feel that this is some secret sauce that they don't want to share. Really, all a marketing plan is just a lot of work. All right. Marketing plans are a lot of work, but there should be some cohesive nature in which you can see that the developer who you're entrusting your money with, that you want to buy property within, has some sort of idea to make sales, or you feel confident and certain that what is being proposed to you, there's a very good and likely chance that that can succeed. Does that make sense? I mean, it makes sense to me. I joke because I have a buddy, a person that works with me, he's an investor, and I share this information with him. And I shared the last marketing plan that I had. It was like 175 pages. And he happens to be with me in Nicaragua during this trip. And he brought it with him, he printed it out. And I swear, he could show it to himself one day. It's like this thick. It's like a binder. And I'm like, so that's what 178 pages looks like, printed out 8.5 by 11. But it's very detailed. It's very detailed. I share that with everybody who wants to purchase property with our development, because I know that in the case that somebody wants to copy that plan, that's actually a good thing. See, when you go into these countries, I mentioned before, there's stuff that you see and stuff that you don't see. And part of the stuff that you don't see is it could be very competitive within developers within a country. I suppose it's not too different than now with star reviews and competitors writing bad reviews on other people's properties or good reviews on their own properties. That happens in real estate development also. And the caution there is it's very difficult to know what is the competition between projects or what people are saying about others. I myself personally take a different point of view, that the more people that have a positive experience with a country, the more the word will get out for people who want to go to that country. And the key criteria for a developer or where you're buying is to know what is the product that is being sold. Now, you might think, You might think that the product being sold is that beachfront lot. It's that beachfront condominium, or it's the bungalow or the townhouse. It is, but it's not the only thing being sold, because from a product standpoint of view, you really want to know what is the message and the brand of the project that you're buying into. And this gets into that familiarity and how you can see patterns develop across emerging markets. And in the real established markets like Mexico, Panama, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, when you take the time to look at the individual projects, which I don't expect you to look at, 2,000 real estate listings across 17 countries like I've done to map, the entire regions of the country and the comparisons between lots, condos, and homes. But what you'll find when you go through and do that sort of due diligence is every project has a flavor. And so when you invest your money and you're starting to choose what project you want to get into, knowing what the flavor is important. It's just as important as understanding where it is in the region or the title or the insurance and the criteria of why you're buying. So for example, let's just say you want to buy because you want to resell your property. So the question becomes, your return or your exit strategy is only as strong or valid as your ability for someone else to take what it is that you have. So it stands to reason that understanding what the project is going to look like in the future or where it's positioning itself in the market is something you want to know. And most people don't. I can tell you, no one's ever asked me this. They just give me money. But it's much more fun when people actually understand it. So let me explain to you. And I may have said it before, you may have heard this before, but you should know as part of your criteria whether you want to own a real estate product that falls into a Walmart category, a Costco category, a Coca-Cola, or Louis Vuitton. There's only 4 real brand categories of real estate, really anything that you're going to buy that falls into. And so if you want to have a property that's exclusive, it's luxury, it's quality construction, it's in the best location, it has every safeguard you could possibly think of and disclosure, amazing beach. Well, you're in the Louis Vuitton category, okay? Which means that you can't expect to get Walmart pricing, okay? That it's a mismatch in an alignment. So you should not think that that project is expensive. What you should be thinking is you just simply can't afford it. So you should be looking at projects that fit within your expectations of affordability, but also where you want to end up in the long run. Now, it doesn't make Walmart bad or Costco bad or Coca-Cola or Lululemon bad, because they're all tremendously successful brands, but they service a specific market. So when you're looking to buy property in a development, in a foreign country, in any particular region, an important thing for you to know is what is the brand that development is trying to create? And is it creating that brand amongst a blue ocean of 5 and 6 others that are playing in the same sandbox? Or is it unique and it stands alone by itself and it's its own thing, it's its own product, it's its own identity? Because that's what's going to create value. That's what's going to create the difference between people who will come and buy your product in whatever development you're in versus you fighting for market share. So I have a very simple mindset when it comes to market share, and that is I refuse to create product that is exact or similar to what else is out there. I rather create new product to differentiate ourselves more. So we're never fighting for the same market share. Okay. I'm always trying to create a bigger market. So when you talk to developers behind the scene or agents, some of those questions you'll want to ask is like, so, like what brand are you developing? What market do you play in? Who are the similar players as you, or what makes you different? And in what category are you trying to become? Because you might get involved with the project and buy something, and you realize at the end of the day, wait a minute, I didn't want to buy into a sleepy retirement community. because that limits the market that you're going to sell to in the end that's going to want your product. Or I didn't buy into XYZ brand. I was expecting this. And that I tell you where that makes a difference. It makes a difference in two specific parts. One, when you come to enjoy your property, what are you going to find? All right. And second, when you go to resell your property, who is the market that's going to buy that product from you? Okay. And these are the patterns that you look for. And you can see this in Mexico. You can see it in Costa Rica. There are developments like, I'll give you an example. While I work and I'm in Nicaragua now for the next 3 months, I've also been in Mexico for the last 4 years with my Nicaraguan wife and 4 kids. And I can give you a perfect example. Down in Nuevo Nayarit, there's like 20 hotels down there. But there's one hotel where you go to, like the Wyndham, I don't know the exact name, but it's the Wyndham Hotel in that area. And it's essentially a retirement community. Okay. That's the flavor of that place. That's who you're going to find in that place. After 9 o'clock, when the sun goes down, dead, no action. Okay. Whereas if you go down to the Rio hotels, there's a white party on Friday and there's action going on, and it's a much younger crowd. So when you purchase your real estate, depending upon the purpose and the usage that you can foresee yourself, you want to think about, like, do I want to be in this action-oriented development, or do I prefer more quiet and secluded? Now, you might prefer that, but when you go to sell it, what is the market out there for that product? It may not be so easy to resell your property, because I use Nicaragua specific because I'm very familiar with it. I've been through 13 regions in the country of Nicaragua, well over probably 500 listings of condos, lots, and homes. And I've seen how long units are on the market, and everything just seems the same to me. There's very little differentiation between what's for sale on the market. So when you start to look at listings and you start to want to create value for the properties that you're going to buy, this branding, this positioning, this where you want to be, what fits you, your lifestyle. Remember, I said you might be talking to your buddy about land and this thing, and it sounds great, and he tells you about all of this, but then you find out it's basically a lower income families development. And that's not your style. Where the market is more, there's a huge market out there with people with money who want to have a more luxurious lifestyle or affordable luxury. And that's where all the properties are selling and moving. So understanding the market and the patterns that repeat itself across the market is really, really important. And the good and bad of that is all of this takes time, but the time is quickly reduced when you apply that filter and the criteria, because then you get down to like 3 countries. And once you can get down to 3 countries, 2 or better, or even 1, that's when you're ready to go deeper and start looking into the flavors of the different regions within the country, meaning the drive time from the airport. Is it a dirt road or is it a paved road? Is it pre-construction or is it finished? Is the pricing under $200 a square foot or over 300? These are more criteria markers for your filter to start eliminating choices. So it makes it easier for you to make a decision, because at the end of the day, you're looking for precision in your decision, and it doesn't come from familiarity. That's not safety. And safety isn't necessarily just what's happening with crime on the street. And you definitely want to be attention to the political situation in the country, but don't let it overwhelm you, or don't let it get you too emotional, because that's going to hamper your decisions. And just remember the rider and the elephant. Okay. When you come into country and you start going to all these site tours, or you start talking to developers and real estate agents, try to take a step back and just have a mindset like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, the pretty pictures are great, but let me ask you a few questions. And I'll tell you what's going to happen. When you start asking the right questions, you're going to very quickly find very few people answering your emails or answering your texts, because when you ask the right questions, which is proper, good due diligence, many projects that can't answer those questions, they simply won't answer you at all. And that's a cultural thing, at least in Latin America. If you don't have an answer, don't answer. They'll very rarely will they answer and say, I don't know. Let me find out. They'll just simply won't answer you, and that's the last you'll hear them. So we talked about the safety, the politicalness, risk, familiarity, the patterns in emerging markets. I went really deep into other areas of risk and managing risk. But what I want to do right now is, because that's an hour, I could go on a lot longer on this topic like I did the other day, but I want to open up the chat and see if there's any questions. So right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, for this part of the presentation, I'm going to sign off and say goodbye and restate who I am, so people watching on YouTube know, and or wherever you're watching replay. But I'm going to stay on the line with those of you who watched this presentation to the end. This would normally be reserved for, let's say, the VIP crowd, but I'm here and it's a nice day out. I just feel like answering some questions today and putting you on a hot seat. If you want to take off your microphone or simply type into the chat box your question, I'll be glad to answer it. So just bear with me for a moment. So that brings us to the conclusion of the One Country Away Challenge, Day 2, where we got into how you can buy real estate and avoid the common mistakes that people make, but more importantly, to watch out for the headlines and the hype that you might fall into the traps. Today, we covered a number of subjects that I'm trusting you may be hearing for the first time, and the information was helpful to you to not only build upon yesterday's filter that we explained and how to eliminate countries and the criteria, but moving that forward where you shouldn't be afraid of your definition of safety, patterns that are coming across emerging markets, the political stability, and the safety of a country. So tomorrow we're going to get into due diligence details, because I've taken you from, the world and how to narrow it down to 3 countries. Today was looking at a little more detailed, probably mindset of getting behind the scenes and a little bit more details underneath the layers that are there. But tomorrow I'm going to get more into the due diligence questions, answers, and bring my full experience to you in an hour of at least 10 questions that 66 people who I've sold to have never asked, but are the most important questions, and why you need to know that so you can apply it to, once you actually find 2 or 3 developments in one country, you can take your due diligence process to the next step. And that's coming from me, a developer of 20 years, spent over $10 million, been around the world. I'm going to give you the complete lowdown of what you need to know, and it's going to shock you. It's going to shock you, but in a good way, in a good way. So I'm going to sign off. I'm Kevin Fleming from Grupo Mariana, developer of Playa Mariana in Nicaragua. We're developing a 922-acre project outside of Masachapa, and we're going to be on site in day 4, where after you learn the due diligence questions tomorrow in this challenge and you come back, now you'll see how we applied it to real land on site live. So I'm really hoping the reception is great on my phone to run a Zoom conference live on site, but we're going to try and pull that off. So I encourage you to join us more tomorrow, and you're going to learn a whole lot more. So I'm Kevin Fleming signing off. Thank you for watching this presentation to the end, and bye for now.